Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming here today. This is the 35th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on the Local Authorities, Service Commissions, and Statutory Authorities, including the THA. And this is the committee's first public hearing pursuant to its inquiry into the efficiency and effectiveness of the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago. These members of the listening and viewing audience are invited to post or send their comments via Parliament's various social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And on this occasion, we have the pleasure of welcoming the personnel from the Ministry of Education and the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago. And at this stage, I would like the members of the Ministry of Education to please introduce yourselves.
Good morning. Kurt Meyer, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education.
Good morning. Bhagwati Manik, Ministry of Education, Director of Finance and Accounts.
Good morning. Carol Bikram, Acting Director, Research Planning and Technical Services.
Morning. Urban Huggins, Deputy Director, Funding and Grants Administration Division.
Would the officials of the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago introduce themselves?
Good morning, Dr. Eduardo Ali, Executive Director.
Good morning, Curtis Floyd, Director, Accreditation and Quality Enhancement.
Good morning, members. My name is Emily Pascal. I am the Director of Finance and Administration.
Good morning, members. Leslie Ann Brackett, Acting Director of the Qualifications and Recognition Department.
Good morning, Chairman, members. Junior Nagasa, Attorney at Law, Legal Research Officer, ACTT.
Good morning. I'm Sharon DeLochan, Assessment Officer in the Qualifications and Recognition Department.
Good. Okay, thank you for all being here. I am Dr. Varmadi Alsing, the chair of this committee, and I'd like my members, my vice chair, and the other members to introduce themselves, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Ramona Ramdial, Vice Chairman.
Good morning, everyone. Nigel De Freitas, member.
Good morning, everyone. Esmond Ford, member.
Good. So I'd like to remind the members of the public the objectives of this inquiry is really to evaluate the efficiency and the effectiveness of the ACTT in executing its mandate and to evaluate the performance of the ACTT in assuring quality in the delivery of tertiary and post-secondary education by local schools affiliated with foreign institutions, and to determine whether the resources, systems, and procedures of the ACTT are sufficient to allow it to operate efficiently. I must say, when the ACTT came about initially, I think it was about 2007, it was faced with many challenges, looking at around 200 schools that were existing. And there were, there's a drive to see if you can get those schools standardized, to get it registered, to get some accredited. So a lot of work went on, and I think Mr. Bradshaw, who was there from the start of it, actually gave us a good synopsis of what went on and the challenges faced. And at least we still have some challenges, we still have some ways of trying to see if we could improve the system. So I appreciate your presence here to help us to see if there's any way we could improve this system. At this stage, I would like to ask the chief officials to make brief opening remarks, not exceeded 2 minutes, because we are now, looking at the timeline to see how we can finish this, a little quickly. So could Mrs. Lenore Batty-Simmons, the permanent, no, sorry, not, Mr. Maya, I think, permanent secretary, could you please give us a brief opening statement?
Good morning to the Honorable Chairman and members of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions, and Statutory Authorities. The Ministry of Education is charged with the responsibility for building human capital development in Trinidad and Tobago in pursuit of sustainable development. The Ministry is responsible for ensuring that all citizens have access to quality education from early childhood to the tertiary level. The ACCT, established by Act No. 16 of 2004, is the principal body responsible for the conducting and advising on the accreditation and registration of post-secondary, tertiary, and training institutions and programs, whether local or foreign. The ministry, essentially the council's role is to ensure that all institutions, public and private, offer education at the tertiary level and that all programs offered at this level adhere to at least a minimum standard, or as in the case of many of our institutions, strive for optimum standards in keeping with the international best practice. The ministry welcomes this inquiry by the Joint Select Committee into the efficiency and effectiveness of the ACCT. Thank you.
Thank you. Would Dr. Eduardo Ali give us brief opening statements, please?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of this august body. I would like to thank you and members of the public for joining us today as we participate in this very important exercise. First and foremost, on behalf of the management and staff of the ACTT, I would like to thank you for arranging this important meeting to permit us to make presentations to you and to the public. I'd like to put on record the appreciation we have for the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago as that body that will help to strengthen the national tertiary education system. As a public body, which is responsible for regulating the provision of quality assurance with locally based post-secondary and tertiary education institutions, and of course those which require recognition of foreign qualifications, we see our role as having a God-given privilege to be a blessing to this nation. To us, integrity, accountability, equity, transparency, and improvement do not just represent our value system, but they are service attitudes for working with our stakeholders. Just upon my assumption, just a mere 4 months ago, I've been undertaking a comprehensive review of the operations and the organization's capacity and effectiveness. As a learning organization, we are incrementally taking corrective actions to improve our operational efficiency as we obtain feedback from staff and our stakeholders. We also have devised a plan for the way forward, both in terms of an annual plan for the next year, and we are preparing our new strategic plan for 2020-25. While not originally conceptualized, I know, in our planning methodology, today's meeting is timely because it provides us with an opportunity to collect your esteemed feedback. And it has also enabled us to use some very important questions you posed to support our continuous improvement efforts. While we have been constrained in responding to the needs of our stakeholders by not having a board of directors for some time, the management and staff have been and still committed to resolving the concerns of the citizenry. Today, we anticipate a meaningful, constructive, and productive dialogue and look forward to your sterling feedback to assist us in strengthening our governance, strategic mandate, and operational delivery mechanisms in the interest of good governance in this country. While I may be personally constrained to respond to specific questions of a historical nature, because of my limited exposure at the ACTT, members of the team are here today to provide some support to you in answering those questions, not just for public consumption, but also to obtain your esteemed advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. And I realize you're just in the position 6 months, I think, or 4 months, right? So, but at least you have your team here to help us elaborate any concerns we may have. At this stage, I would like to remind persons that when you are addressing, activate your microphone, and then you can also deactivate it once you have concluded your contribution. And we would now proceed, and if anyone wants questions, please direct it through the chair. And a little housekeeping rules, please, your cell phones, if you can just keep it off for a while. So starting with your submission, Dr. Ali, you mentioned you had some challenges in terms of the board. You know, you don't have directors of the board. And I looked at the submissions before of Mr. Bradshaw, and this was one of the challenges along the way. Sometimes you don't have the board being present to give you a quorum or to have the proper run-ins. Now, I know this question now will be there, but this question I want to direct to the Ministry of Education. What has seemed to be the problem in giving this institution their members to fulfill their mandate? Because it's something that we saw in the past mentioned, and again, we have seen it come about again.
There has been some difficulties in the past, and it really has been some bureaucracy between the ministry and I believe it's basically a bureaucratic problem. But what we have done recently, we've put a number of things in place to streamline our board appointments, not just for ACTT, but for all our institutions. And we will soon see that those delays should become a thing of the past.
So will the council soon be fully constituted?
Yes, we are working assiduously to make sure that all the board positions are filled.
Could you give us an idea, how many members are needed again to fulfill this mandate?
We appointed. Right. We recently appointed the board, and I think everybody is in place except, no, we have everybody. Yes. Board is in place now.
Yes, so just a matter of parliamentary.
No, the board is in place.
It's in place. Good.
Yes.
All right. So that challenge that we had soon would be solved.
That has been dealt with.
Thank you, Chair. To the Ministry of Education, now I'm seeing that the yearly allocation for the ACTT declined from 16.5 million in 2016-2017 to 10 million in 2018-2019. Can you give reasons as to this decline in funding to the ACTT?
It did decline, but in 2020, if you check this allocation, it has increased to $12 million this year. The decline was, well, we had some budgetary constraints. We had some caps placed on us. The cap was raised slightly this year, so we were able to increase their allocation slightly to 12 million.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. I would really like to start at the top, right? We understand that an institution can be registered, an institution can be recognized, and one can be accredited. I would like you all to distinctly, as possible, explain those three options, not only for me, for the committee, and for the listening public.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The issue is that institutions that want to operate within our domestic shores, at the level of post-secondary or tertiary education provisions, are required to be registered. Registration is really an operational mechanism where institutions get the legal authority to operate. There are minimum standards for registering an institution. Those standards ensure that the institutions have the capacity to deliver quality programs. Where recognition is concerned, such institutions that are foreign, that come onto our shore and are having collaborative arrangements with institutions locally, those institutions are required to be recognized by the ACTT. The process involves an assurance that the provisions available at the foreign location are evaluated and that the institution locally has the capacity to deliver the program locally. Where accreditation is concerned, this is, if you wish, a higher level of delivery where the institutions are required to demonstrate not only do they have the capacity to deliver quality education, but they also have the ability to continue in delivering that quality education. So what usually pertains is the institution undergoes a very rigorous, sometimes 2 to 3 year period of evaluation, preparation and evaluation, to ensure that the institution has been and can continue to deliver quality education to citizens.
Follow-up. Are there any institutions at present in Trinidad and Tobago operating and may not be, as you said, accredited or recognized in terms of the foreign affiliation with the local institutions?
Accreditation is a voluntary process, so it is not mandatory for institutions to go through that process. Currently, we have approximately 14 institutions that have undergone that process. Some of them, or at least in one instance, one of those institutions has opted out of accreditation and has chosen to be re-registered. Be that as it may, the institutions that are foreign, all of the institutions that are foreign that have come to us have actually gone through the process of recognition, and we also look at what we call transnational recognition, which is where the institution that's delivering the programs here, they're required to be registered with ACTT, and they're also required to be evaluated in terms of the quality of the programs that are delivered here. So generally speaking, institutions that operate in Trinidad and Tobago are required to do so. However, there are those institutions that may have a period of lapse in terms of going through a process with us because of the application and the period by which they're evaluated to actually have a result. There are those that may have, for one reason or the other, opted out of the process and may have opted to deliver lower-level programs that are not within the purview of ACTT. And there are those as well that have chosen to close their operations, and so they are no longer offering such programs. So those are the categories that usually we encounter where institutions that are operating or that choose to continue to operate may be not in a position to undergo the process with us.
Okay. Again, on page 5, you mentioned about 14. Those are the 14 you're referring to based on your submission. But there's an institution that operates out in the east. I ain't too sure I want to mention the name, but it's well populated in terms of students, attendance, and so on, but I'm not seeing them listed here as being accredited.
If the institution is not listed as being accredited, they may be registered and offering programs as a registered institution, and if they're offering foreign programs, those programs would probably have been evaluated for transnational recognition.
And when the process is completed, will the accreditation be retroactive? How it operates? So like an institution is operating 3 years now, right? They may not be listed here as being accredited, but when they do become accredited, will the process be considered retroactive, or how is it done?
If you may, Honorable Member, I'd like to pass this question on for the response from the Director of Accreditation and Quality Enhancement.
Good morning. Good morning, all, again. With respect to your question with retroactive accreditation, the institution, after undergoing the evaluation, once the decision is made to have the institution accredited, the accreditation would take effect from the date of the board's decision. Yes? And one of the things that I would need to mention as well is that institutions pursuing institutional accreditation must have at least had registered status, must have had that registered status for a minimum of 3 years, and must be offering their locally developed program, which was approved by ACTT, and have graduated one cohort from that program. So while registration is mandatory, accreditation, as was mentioned previously, is voluntary.
Well, so in terms of the validity of the particular certification that the individual may possess prior to the board decision, is that certification affected in any way?
Once the institution would have been registered, the programs that the institution is approved to offer would also be considered under the accreditation.
Before, let me just ask one thing. If someone opens a school and that person has not applied for registration and just teaching students and advertising, is there anything in the law that you can penalize that institution?
I would probably want to defer some of the responses to the legal person, but in my response to that, the institution, once you are operating and offering post-secondary, tertiary qualifications, according to the law, Chapter 3906, you will be operating illegally, and you will be subject to a fine of $5,000 for every day you continue to operate upon summary conviction, and $25,000 initially.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question might have come out in some of the answers before, but I'm just trying to drill down into something. So forgive me if it's a repeat. What is the real, and I focus on the word real, benefit of being accredited? Because to me, in what you've said before, it seems that this is something for locals. And foreign institutions that want to work by way of educational material in Trinidad and Tobago. So what is the real benefit to accreditation, given that it's voluntary?
Accreditation is the international language that is known as far as quality assurance in tertiary education. With registration, as was mentioned previously, the institutions demonstrate that they have minimum standards in order to offer the tertiary qualifications to the public. With accreditation, you are looking to see how well all these systems are working. Accreditation would facilitate mutual recognition of the qualifications internationally, and it would also facilitate transfer of not only staff, but students to other institutions internationally to pursue further education. And it is testament to the quality that the institution is offering to members of the public.
So, see, that's why I asked that question. So it drilled down just a little bit further. So this accreditation that an institution will receive in Trinidad and Tobago, it's internationally recognized. Great. So if an institution has an accreditation, let's say from the US, do they have to go through this process in Trinidad and Tobago, or do you sort of accept the fact that their respective or corresponding body in their country has accredited them, and therefore if they're entering Trinidad and Tobago, either in collaboration with another entity, then you sort of recognize that as opposed to them having to go through the process? Does that happen?
Member, thank you very much for your question. I'll respond to that. Generally speaking, the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago is a member of the International Network for Quality Assurance Agencies in Higher Education. That agency has over 200 members worldwide. These are accrediting agencies, and by virtue of being a member, the recognition of our qualifications here are mutually accepted. So an institution that has been accredited in the United States by any of the 7 regional accrediting bodies, or that has been accredited in the UK or in any other part of the world, those will be automatically recognized by us. However, we do have a database that we subscribe to, offered by the United Kingdom's National Recognition Information Center. And the database provides us with a comprehensive list of all of the qualifications that worldwide that have been recognized and accredited in their domestic provisions. So we use that information on a regular basis, primarily for the purpose of issuing statements on recognition for persons who are interested in obtaining those statements for employment primarily, or as was indicated previously, for further education. So there are other benefits to accreditation, and the issue has to do with employment and employability. Of course, we have a number of graduates who are seeking opportunities in the employment market, both here and abroad. And the stamp of approval that ACTT provides on the qualifications that these holders would have gotten from an accredited institution versus a registered institution guarantees that the person will be obviously recognized in a foreign jurisdiction.
So there are very good benefits to being accredited. So then I want to ask, what percentage of registered entities are accredited?
If I may, we have, just as I said, about 14. Initially, in 2008, there were 81 institutions. Currently, we have just about 50 or 55 to 60 institutions that are registered and accredited. So you're looking at a ratio of about 1 to 5 almost, in terms of those that are accredited versus those that are registered and accredited. And therein lies the issue, because when ACTT was established initially, it was conceptualized, while it is voluntary and not mandatory for institutions to go through accreditation, that you would have seen an increased interest by registered institutions nationally to move to the higher levels of quality, which would have been to become accredited. That is a huge investment, and quite often institutions may not have the resources and/or the capacity to undergo that activity. Notwithstanding, many would have been satisfied with having the minimum requirements and not moving to a higher level of quality.
And that's why you notice the reason I was asking the questions in terms of what's the benefit, because I want the public to hear exactly what the benefits are of becoming accredited, because I'm quite aware in other industry certifications and the different levels you have, and professionals in a particular industry, be it engineering or sciences, would understand what I'm talking about. And when you get to the higher levels, it comes with the kind of benefits, higher pay, that kind of stuff. So is there a intent to do an educational drive to sort of, balance that ratio a little bit better, try to get it to 1-to-1, which I guess is the best case scenario for the Accreditation Council? You all intend to do an educational drive?
Member, thank you for that question. In short, our response is yes. However, to do an education drive nationally to get institutions to become more aware of what is required and to get the public at large to become more aware would require some investment of capital to support that educational drive. ACTT has been constrained in that area for some time. So we have resorted to very simple means of getting the message out. For example, I have already, upon my assumption, I started to visit all accredited institutions with a view to sharing with them our strategic mandate, the proposed strategic mandate, and to get their buy-in, because we're looking at a number of other areas outside of what we traditionally offer. For example, one of the areas that has not been traditionally provided at ACTT is the issue of looking at online accreditation of online programs and courses. There's also the issue of professional development and continuing education courses offered for varying professions, and we are about to look at the issue of the standards, for approving standards for accrediting those courses that are offered both in a fully online environment as well as those that are offered for professionals. So that is part of our public education drive. However, as I said before, the issue is primarily a capital issue to be able to invest in moving forward with that. The registered institutions understand the benefits of accreditation. They are fully aware. However, as I indicated, there are some issues with respect to the investment on their side to move in that direction.
Thank you very much, Doctor. But let's just go back a little bit. So from your submissions, I'm seeing in front of me, we have 146 non-registered institutions. You have 14 registered institutions. Now, I understand that there's a penalty attached to not being registered, as Mr. Floyd earlier on said. Are these 146 non-registered institutions currently under or paying these fines? Are they paying these fines as we speak?
Member, thank you. Deputy Vice Chairman, thank you very much for your question. Just to indicate that 115 of those institutions are not within the purview of the ACTT. By a matter of policy, there has been a distinction made between what we call level 1 and level 2 programs and levels 3 and above. Essentially, level 3 programs are those that are at the bachelor's degree level or at the certificate and diploma levels and above. Those that are below are primarily regulated by the National Training Agency. So that list that you have includes the list, 115 institutions or providers that are regulated by the National Training Agency who would approve centers, and those may be approved centers by the NTA.
So the unapproved centers by the NTA, are they currently being fined?
I will not be able to respond to that because I have not come across that information, but I will pass the question on to, if possible, to our legal person.
Thank you.
You, member. To date, my department has not received any information with respect to any institution operating in contravention of Section 26. As Dr. Ali indicated, before any action can be taken, the first thing is to determine whether the institution does in fact fall within the purview of the ACTT. That information has not been forwarded to the legal department. If the information does come to the legal department, in keeping with Section 26(4), the necessary action would be taken.
Who needs to forward that information to the ACTT?
Well, information relative to those issues can come from a number of fora. It can come from official complaints. It can be unearthed through our monitoring of institutions. It can come through newspapers and so on. As I indicated, none of that information has been brought to my department.
So am I to understand that the onus is on the institutions themselves to come to come forward to be registered
Yes.
in order to not be fined?
Yes, of course. In order to fall within the provisions of the Act, it is incumbent on all of those institutions to come forward.
And what is the ACTT doing to encourage these institutions to come forward to register? Doctor?
Yes, well, what I can say is from my limited knowledge is that in the past, ACTT has been, as was indicated, monitoring those institutions that have been providing education to citizens that are not registered. And that information, which has come to the attention of ACTT, has followed up with correspondence to them indicating that they need to be registered. In terms of the legal aspect, as was indicated, that is another matter altogether. But generally speaking, once information comes to the attention of the ACTT, at least historically, ACTT then contacts the institution to let them know that they need to be registered. This is the procedure for registration. This is the policy for registration. And thereafter, they're required to do so. For the most part, institutions initiate the process with us, but from the information I receive, quite often that process is not followed through. There are delays on their part, and the delays continue to a certain extent where they may eventually shift from offering the level of programs that are under our purview to the level of programs offered under another purview where they may go through an alternative process.
So can the Ministry of Education act on your behalf to approach these institutions to get them registered?
We could do that through the NTA. And I believe what we will have to do is take a look very carefully at if there is a gap to make sure that if they're not covered by ACTT, NTA is picking them up, and if they're not covered by either institution, then fines can be levied.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
1 minute. Yeah. Well, I knew before the advent of the ACTT, there were about 200 institutions existing, and after, those institutions were approached, and some of them, as you quite rightly said, couldn't afford to put mechanisms in place to have their internal quality surveying and whatnot, and I think it went down to 94, right? So definitely, you had that level of decline. But now we're still in a situation where after all this time, 2007, we still have those institutions. As I say, we need to get something to get them back into the forefront where, they could be encouraged or somehow help. Because again, if you could educate more persons in the proper manner, I think this will help us. Mr. De Freitas.
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. I just want to take it from the standpoint of the end user, because these are educational institutions. Just from my knowledge and knowledge of the public, how would someone who is looking at these non-registered entities, because some of them are like draperies and what I call technical educational stuff that's going on, and you see them all over the place sometimes, sewing, that kind of stuff. How would someone know when looking for these entities, whether it's accredited or even registered? How would they know? Is there something that goes up? Or is there a thing that goes on their website if they have one? Is there a published list?
Yes, we take every effort to provide a comprehensive listing of all registered and accredited institutions on our website. It's public information. Notwithstanding, there's what is called the compendium of institutions. It's a comprehensive list of all the registered and accredited institutions that are under the ACTT, as well as the programs and qualifications that are duly recognized by us. So that information is available, and since it was first introduced, the traffic, public traffic towards utilizing or using the service is quite high. So we have a situation where persons can avail themselves through that mechanism. The other mechanism is, of course, quite often persons come to us for statements on recognition. And at that level, they discover when they approach us whether the particular qualification is a qualification that is under our jurisdiction as an agency, or they, as I said before, they may be under the jurisdiction of the National Training Agency. And at that point, they would refer the matter to the National Training Agency for further information. However, where we are concerned, we provide them with the information that they need at either one point through the website, as I indicated, or when they come to us for a statement on recognition, or sometimes they may just call for and make inquiries publicly, and we provide the information to them.
Right, so I'm coming to a particular question. So I just want to ask this bridge question. So there's no compelling of institutions, or I should say accredited institutions, to put up a sticker or any kind of mark to say, well, listen, this is an accredited institution, so that somebody who engages at that level, which is the institution, sees that and knows, well, okay, this is an accredited institution.
All registered and accredited institutions, they have a trademark from ACTT that allows them to be able to advertise that affiliation with ACTT. So if they're registered, there's a registered institution trademark. If they're accredited, there's accredited institution trademark. And that information is also used in public advertisements from the institution. Notwithstanding, when an institution is registered by us or accredited by us, public advertisements do go out, primarily through all the newspapers, for persons from the public to know that the institution has been registered and or accredited, and the duration for that registered status or accredited status.
All right, so and this is the question that I was getting to, and the ministry may or may not be able to answer this. So barring all of that, what recourse is there to a student who has gone through the entire process? For whatever reason, they may not have done the necessary checks. They've come out with a certification and realized it's no good. What recourse does that student then have? Because they would have spent money to get this, certification or diploma or whatever it is, only to realize after that it's not accredited, it's not recognized, the institution itself is not even registered, and you've just wasted time and money. So what recourse is there to students who may find themselves in that situation?
Generally speaking, as was indicated, our public education drive primarily has targeted students in schools, persons at tertiary institutions, and those who attend certain events, career fairs and others, over the years. And at that level, information is provided to students so that they are aware of which institutions are accredited and which ones are registered. They are also given an opportunity to come to us in terms of obtaining further information or clarification if they so desire. And those are the channels that we've used. As far as where the institution is concerned or the individual is concerned, quite often we suggest to them to do what is called an intend to statement on recognition. And we try to compel them as far as possible to do that. What that means is if a student or member of the public is desirous of pursuing a degree or any qualification at any institution in Trinidad and Tobago, we do provide a service where they get a statement on recognition prior to embarking upon the degree that says the program is duly recognized and or accredited in Trinidad and Tobago. And that provides them with the opportunity of being able to know for sure that the qualification is one that is acceptable. Quite often there are those who will not know about the service, and those are the ones we try to reach through various public channels, but we're not the only ones who send that message out, because what we do is we work closely, as I said, with the school system, and we work closely with the institutions, and we advise them as much as possible to advise their students as well. So those are usually the channels that we take to get the information out.
Very much, and again, that is great. But what I really wanted to get to was there will always be that one person who, for whatever reason, isn't captured in that. And I was trying to find out if there's any recourse for that person, because somebody may be listening right now, and wanting that information.
Just two possible courses. One is we do have students do write us, registering their complaints. And there's a due process that we have, which is primarily lobbied through the Office of the Executive Director and through our legal department. The other opportunity they have is to go to the ministry to get that recourse addressed.
I just want to make a follow-up question of my senator colleague there. Accredited institutions' certifications are recognized internationally. But if you are just registered, it's locally only. Clarify.
That's correct. So registered institutions, it demonstrates that the institution is legally operating domestically in Trinidad and Tobago. We cannot qualify the program quality at those institutions unless they have gone through program approval, which we offer as a service, or they've gone through transnational recognition if it's a foreign qualification being offered in Trinidad. Accredited institutions, however, enjoy the full benefits because those institutions, the programs that are offered at those institutions, undergo a comprehensive evaluation by ACTT, which would mean at the end of our evaluation, we guarantee that the quality of programming that is offered at these institutions and the qualifications that are offered are surpass or meet the standards that we have for quality education.
Okay, right. Just one. You want to add to what your colleague is saying?
Yes, just want to clarify one thing. We have not yet received any complaints of that nature. Regarding your specific question. We do have a register, and the public is free to write us if a particular situation like that occurs. But we haven't, up to this date, we haven't received any complaints like that.
Okay.
Just one.
Add to that 1 second, but I wonder if that's a function of you go through the program, you finish, you get your certification, and it may take a little while, you know, to apply for a job or to even properly use it. And by that time, they're not even thinking that there's some sort of a recourse. That's why I asked that question, because somebody may be listening. They would be quite angry, obviously. But to find out that this thing is no good may actually be a number of months to years after they've actually got it. So I'm glad you said that, because, you know, that might be a reason.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, again, we were provided with the list of institutions that are not registered in Trinidad and Tobago, right? We were also provided with a list of institutions who have attained accreditation in Trinidad and Tobago. What about the list of registered institutions in Trinidad and Tobago? Because you see, what is happening, Mr. Chairman? I'm zeroing in on a name, a particular name that I'm not seeing, right? It's an institution in the East, Mr. Chairman. No, again, right, I want you all to bear with me.
Yeah,
because again, as a member of parliament, individuals come to us with everything, and individuals come with regards to scenarios like those, all right? So again, how are we to deal with situation by those, and you know, you see thousands of people patronizing this particular institution, you know, and again, as the Accreditation Council, right, the legal department and the different various quality control and the compliance, how are we to identify those institutions to make it clearly to the public that, listen, you all need to be careful with regards to the various institutions when you're looking at your educational, you know, could you shed some light? Because again, you know, probably it might be a discussion to have after, right? But, you know, I'm really curious.
Sure, Honorable Member. I will make an initial response and then allow the Director of Accreditation and Quality Enhancement to elaborate. Generally speaking, in terms of the lists that you have, they primarily respond to the questions that were provided. So there is a list of registered institutions that is on our website, and the public can go on our website and they can look at the list of registered institutions. If an institution is not named, therefore it is not registered. And so there, in that regard, that institution really would be operating illegally. And there are, as we've indicated, there are certain provisions made for treating with such institutions. I'm not sure if the Director of Accreditation and Quality Enhancement would like to elaborate on that issue.
Thank you. So, again, we go back to this illegal operations and the fee for the unregistered bodies. First of all, just to clarify, what is the fee to register?
Good morning again, honorable members. The fee for registration, there are different fees at different stages of the registration process. There is the application processing fee when you submit the application, and that is $1,000 with submission of the application. There is also the evaluation fee, which is used for payment of the evaluators who will be conducting the evaluation of the institution. And then there is the certification fee, which is used for publishing in the daily newspapers as well as the news, the certificates.
Yeah, so how much is...
So it varies.
Okay.
Depending on the evaluation itself can vary between $10,000 to $15,000 because it is dependent on the number of sites that will have to be visited and the number of evaluators who will be contracted to conduct the exercise. The advertising or certification fee, that too sometimes could have some fluctuations because it will depend on the rates at the time.
So what's the average, like an
average?
average?
It could work out to about, again, maybe about $3,000–4,000.
So we're looking like, let's just say, we're looking at an average fee of about $20,000 in general per institution. Just averaging from what you have just said, right? I know that there are different levels. So is it that we can deduce that the cost is a deterrent for these unregistered institutions? Is it that you need to have a cheaper fee structure implemented to have these 146 unregistered institutions come and pay to operate legally?
There have been instances where the fee for some of these institutions would have been prohibitive and they decided to withdraw. That would have been in minimal instances. In a few other instances, the institutions determined that they could not uphold the standards to undergo the process. They felt it was too rigorous. They didn't have the necessary systems and resources in place. And so they opted out of pursuing the registration with the council.
Dr. Ali, you wanted to?
I would also like to elaborate on a point. We have done our comparative benchmarking with fees charged by other bodies internationally. And the fees that we charge our institutions in Trinidad and Tobago for public information is between 5 to 25% of what international accreditation bodies charge. So we are already at disadvantage.
Below, yeah.
We are below the benchmark, way below the benchmark, but we do know that some institutions have a concern about the fees that we charge. But I think it's important for the public to understand that we are already setting fees at a very low level, and we are offering the accreditation primarily, the stamp of approval that we have is just as good as the recognition given to any accreditation provided in any major developed country in the world.
So a quick follow-up. So again, would it be safe to say that it's not really the fee that is the deterrent to register, but really the standards that need to be upheld? But this can have serious impact on students attending these institutions, and I think that something needs to be done ASAP.
So what I'm gathering here is that the quality assurance, looking at the functioning of these institutions, right? You have persons going in and checking on those individuals, the schools, inspecting the schools. Is it done to the institutions after you have given them the accreditation, registration? Do you go and check and see if it's maintained?
The response to that is generally yes. We have what we call pre, mid, and post-evaluation and monitoring activities. And those include annual visits to the institutions and annual reports that are provided to the ACTT on those institutions. And the data we require is fairly comprehensive. In fact, it's, when you look at what we ask and you compare with what other accrediting agencies ask in other parts of the world, we request a lot more information from them than what is asked by those other bodies in other parts of the world. But I think maybe the director would like to elaborate on that point.
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Ali. We have a multifaceted approach to the monitoring of the institutions. And these monitoring would take place prior to engagement with the council, during, as well as after a status is awarded by the council. We would have mentioned some of them previously, where we get feedback from members of the public through various forms of media. We also monitor the newspapers on a daily basis for advertisements, and if there are any errant institutions, these are things that we would follow up on. Also, when students come in to apply for these statements on recognition, this is where we might be able to pick up on an institution that we are not aware of, or on institutions offering programs that have not been approved by us. So some of these things take place prior. When an institution is applying for institutional registration, They would submit to us information that we would review to determine whether or not the programs that they're offering is really within our purview. There are several instances where persons would want to become registered because of the status associated with it and to be able to attract students. But upon review of the level of the programs, it will be determined that they are not within our purview. So we are not in a position to engage them in the registration process. Institutions are also required to submit reports to us on annual reports, progress reports coming out of the evaluation exercise. And these reports are monitored. They are reviewed by the officers, and any gaps that have been identified would be communicated to the institutions for them to be able to close off on those gaps. Institutions can be registered for a maximum period of 3 years. Accreditation is for a maximum period of 7 years as it stands currently. And during that period, apart from the annual reports, if there are any issues or complaints that would come up, any issues that come out of the annual reports that they submit, it would warrant, in some instances, a site visit to the institution. Particularly with the accredited institutions, we have what is called a midterm review. And this is, for example, if the institution is awarded accredited status for a period of 5 years, 2.5 years into the status, we go back in on a midterm review to ensure that the institution is progressing towards the continuing institutional accreditation process and closing off on any gaps that would have been, or the recommendations that would have been made by the evaluation team. The status that would be awarded, whether it be registered or accredited, of course, is for a stipulated period of time. And so, in order to maintain that status, the institution would have to apply for re-registration or continuing registration, as this is called, or continuing institutional accreditation, where we would go back in and look at the institution again, complete a comprehensive evaluation of the institution to ensure that it is at least maintaining the standards and to see what progress it is making in the respective areas.
So is there a difference between approval for the program and approval for the institution? So could you just elaborate more on that? Yeah.
In registered institutions, registration looks at the capacity of the institution to be able to offer the particular programs. These programs must also undergo what is referred to as program approval. We want to ensure that the programs are up to standard for delivery to the public. Likewise, when the institution undergoes the accreditation exercise, one of the main mechanisms that it must have in place is an internal program approval, monitoring, and approval process for its programs. And this too would be taken into consideration in evaluating the institution. So the programs being offered at that time would be subsumed under the accreditation, the institutional accreditation, sorry.
So Dr. Ali, if someone gets program approval, it's ACTT approved a degree, and you mentioned that there is also the link with the international organization. I think it's AQAA, the American, and the other organizations. Would that person automatically be able to go and work in these other jurisdictions, or do they have to, or will your approval you have given, will they still have to go and apply to the EQAA for another sort of a stamp of approval?
Generally speaking, Mr. Chairman, the ACTT, when it approves a program, as was indicated, is primarily approving it for delivery. Mm-hmm. It does not mean that after the program has been approved, necessarily that the provisions are made. Those provisions are tracked after we go through for another site visit to the institution. Where accreditation is concerned, the answer to your question is generally yes. However, there are domestic legal provisions in each territory that must be required. There are professional regulatory mechanisms in each country. So every standard that is established for the profession in that country must be met before the individual can, of course, obtain employment. And of course, there are immigration and other factors that need to be taken into account. But notwithstanding that, the individual qualification that the person has will be, and the credits that have been awarded for that qualification will be recognized by the other country, provided that it is part of our international agreement.
If I could just ask here, so everything we've discussed today, to me, seems to apply to physical entities. You just spoke about site visits and whatnot. Where does online entities fall into this? Does it fall under your purview? Because you spoke about program approvals. And online entities, strictly the program and the information, you don't need to physically be anywhere except in front of a computer. So where do online entities fall under, in terms of your jurisdiction and whatnot?
Generally speaking, Honourable Member, the standards we have for registration and accreditation could ideally apply to a face-to-face environment or to an online environment. However, we do recognize that in an online environment, primarily if you're talking about an institution, there are different types of scenarios that will present themselves that will be different contextually to what happens in a face-to-face institution or brick-and-mortar institution. So what we have been doing is we've established a team that is looking at the issue, and we are looking at developing benchmarking with standards for online programs initially. In our new strategic plan, we are hoping to look at two sets of factors or two sets of scenarios. Scenario A, where you have courses and programs that are offered in the online environment by institutions locally who wish to have those programs offered. We will have the standards in place for evaluating those institutions. And for those that are fully online institutions, we will register and, where possible, accredit those online institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. And through if they're accredited, not if they're registered, but if they're accredited by virtue of our international treaties, we would be satisfied to be able to ensure that those institutions would be able to provide their education in other jurisdictions outside of Trinidad, the Caribbean, and of course internationally.
Online entities need to be registered right now, or is that something that we need to look at?
Generally, as I said, they could apply to be registered and or accredited with our standards as they are. However, as I indicated, the standards need to be relooked to make provisions for those that are fully online, particularly those that would have provisions in other jurisdictions. There are institutions that have been established in other countries. Some of them are operating at minimal or zero quality. We call them diploma mills. And we have obviously been educating the public as to what diploma mills are and the need for students in particular to not attend diploma mill institutions or providers. But notwithstanding that, there are fully well-established online institutions, universities, and colleges around the world. And so our standards that we put in place here will allow us to also recognize those that are coming onshore to students who want to pursue those programs.
Understandably so. But what I was trying to get at is, for example, somebody locally may have a degree in a particular field and decide that they want to, offer online courses. Does that individual need to register like a school, brick and mortar, would? Or is that something that we have not captured in any legislation?
Generally speaking, we do have what we call our foreign awarding bodies and foreign institutions, as well as our transnational providers, and they're covered under that. And I could ask, if possible, the assessment officer who handles transnational qualifications to speak to that.
Thank you, Honourable Member. All institutions that are foreign institutions that are bringing programs to Trinidad and Tobago, whether they are of an online nature or face-to-face, because some of the local institutions do provide local tutorials for transnational programs. They need to come through the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago for recognition of those programs. And we would specifically look at the resources that students would be afforded to provide them with the support they need to continue the program.
My apologies. I understand that, because that's what's happening now. People here will do an online course and they will get the certificate from a university. I'm talking about the reverse. A Trinidad and Tobago citizen sets up a website, offers courses. Does that person need to register that institution in the same way that all of the ones that are not registered here are illegal?
If I may speak to that, the answer to your question is yes, they must.
Go ahead, Asman. Yeah.
Appreciate. I have one question for the ACTT, and then I want to bring in the Ministry of Education, Mr. Chairman. We noted that several organizations, right, especially belonging to the state, right, as not being registered, right? For example, we have Atlantic Energy Company of Trinidad and Tobago, Export Centers Company, the GAP Geriatric Adolescents Partnership Program, and then Tech, especially, with regards to Tech. What's happening with regards to those companies?
If I may, Honorable Member, generally speaking, that list that I spoke about that has 115 providers are from the National Training Agency. So those entities would have gone to the National Training Agency because the qualifications they offer are at a level that are not within the jurisdiction of the ACTT.
Okay. But for educational institutions, you will definitely govern them.
Yes, primarily those that are offering degrees, certificates, and all the way to doctoral degrees, they come to us.
Okay, fine. I'd just like to go to the Education Ministry. In your submission, you provided us with the various organizations that are gate-funded and those that are not gate-funded. And again, sitting as a member of Parliament, again, a lot of parents, would visit our offices in order to verify and certify. Have you all ever listed, just as how you have clearly listed us in this document, whether via the media, in the newspapers, I know probably you may say it's on the website, but again, for some individuals, they may not be able to go to the website. Have you all listed from a marketing point of view in terms of listing these institutions that are not gate-funded versus those that are gate-funded for the public to have a total understanding?
Let Mr. Huggins answer this one.
Morning all. Thank you for... Institutions that are gate-funded are usually advertised because it is an asset to the institution to know, and for the students who knows that the students are eligible for gate funding. So when institutions do advertise for their programs, they usually add or they usually include in their submission that the program is gate funded.
What about those that are not being gate funded? Do they clearly specify at the time that they are not gate funded for the individual?
They may not, but what will happen is that if a institution, if it is that a student applies for a program that is not gate funded, the student will then know that this program is not gate funded. So even if the institution is delinquent in not informing the student that the program is not gate funded, when the student do apply for gate funding, they are then informed that this particular program or institution is not tied to the gate.
So the process, I take my daughter to the particular institution, we apply, right? We get the necessary breakdown, invoices, at what's the cost, right? You then will then go to the Ministry of Education office now to ascertain whether you will be applicable for the funding of GATE. How the process goes from when you do the application? Clarify for the public.
Okay.
Well, I got the impression that once you're applying for GATE, the program has to be ACTT approved, right? Once you're applying to get GATE funded, it has to be approved.
It must be approved.
Yeah.
No, but Mr. Chairman, remember the student don't know that, Remember the student who is going to apply may not know that information. They want to be educated, so they are now going to the particular institution in order to apply. Then they will be informed, as you say, the institution wants to get the business. So they may not say up front that, listen, this program is not GATE approved. So child going with the parent and then to realize when they go to the Ministry of Education now, that particular institution is that. So I just want to know for the listening public or the viewing public, clarify for us how the process operates for the particular individual. Because again, we'll have a lot of students now, who would have now received their results, now looking to seek some sort of entry.
For the listening public, it is strongly recommended that when they are interested in pursuing tertiary education, they should look to see what institutions are approved for GATE funding. And that is done through the ministry website. The ministry does have a website included, and you will get that information. For those students who have applied for funding or goes to an institution, and it is on the student also to ask the institution at the time, are you eligible for GATE funding? It is a legitimate question. Any student can ask an institution.
Just indulge me, because you're saying that GATE funding is only applicable to the ACTT stamp of approval, right? Are there any unregistered institutions that are getting GATE funded?
No.
You're certain about that?
Certain. You must be, one of the criteria for accessing GATE is that you must be registered and accredited.
Okay, good, good.
And this is why initially, I think when GATE came about, there was a move to try to get that ACTT approval, stamp of approval. But you see, what I'm getting, members, is I'm getting a sort of a discomfort. Member Ford mentioned some school, then we are getting some ideas that there may be some individuals, putting out there, schools that may not be up to mark or, lacking in certain things. A former executive director of the ACTT suggested that a public affirmation should be introduced into the registration process. So let's say somebody's coming to be re-registered, or when you're going to look at their, after your inspection. So where members of the public can express concerns and have, the institution, any sort of problems they have, put it into that. So what do you think about this idea of public affirmation? I think it's a good idea. Could you comment on the feasibility of this suggestion? ACTT. And are you aware of any similar approach is adopted in any other country? So at least we can get like a stamp of disapproval or any sort of red flags being raised on certain institutions.
Well, there are different procedures and processes used by different international accrediting agencies. For example, in the UK, there are at least two agencies that I'm aware of. Their process is if an individual has a concern, and they don't call them complaints, they have a concern with an institution and the qualifications that they're offering or the support services provided to the students, they will normally publicly, through the public means, a website primarily, register their concerns. We have been looking at that issue. While we have a specific procedure that we follow, we realize that the procedure needs to be benchmarked and to be upgraded. And so we have already started looking at those models with a view to upgrading what we offer. Be that as it may, any person from the public who has a concern can write to us and have written to us indicating their concerns. And what happens usually is, having written, we would then investigate those concerns. We would look at the technicality of the concern, and then we look at the legality of the concern. If there are issues, those issues would be addressed at the level of the institution. We raise the matters with the institution, and the institution then is responsible for addressing those matters and reporting to us in terms of how they have gone about redressing the issue. In terms of a public affirmation, I think it's a good approach, and it's certainly something that we will we'll look at in terms of how we could integrate that within our present system.
Sure, thank you. Moving on to another topic of discussion, to the ACTT, you indicated that your staff complement is not adequate, and I understand you have at least 20 vacancies. Could you tell me, or could you give an update as of now? What is the situation?
Honorable Member, the situation has not changed. Previously, as you see from the org chart that was provided, there was a shortage based on the previous chart that was proffered. Because of resource constraints, we have not been able to fill any of those vacancies. Notwithstanding, given that is based on a particular context, and now that we are in a different financial context or situation, we have been looking at streamlining our workflows. So we've already undertaken to do an analysis of the workflows in the organization, and we are looking at how we can streamline the workflows in keeping with the resources that we have available. So generally speaking, it has posed some constraints because, as I indicated, the ratio usually of technical staff to admin staff in most of these organizations is primarily high, 4-to-1 in accrediting agencies, in most large accrediting agencies. And we recognize that we need to do more in terms of improving or enhancing our technical staff complement.
Okay, I also understand that according to Section 16 of the ACTT Act, you can receive special grants. Have you made any application for any special project or activities to accommodate for these grants?
Yes, we have. In fact, most recently, we submitted a proposal to the Ministry of Education for funding under the European Development Fund, and we are awaiting an approval of that.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to go back to get some clarity here, because I know double-checking the information provided by both the ACTT and the Ministry of Education. On the Ministry of Education document provided on page 5, tertiary level institutions which are currently in receipt of GATE funding. We have number 5 and number 6. Metal Industries, Company MIC, Tobago Hospitality and Tourism Industry. And if we go to your amended document, right on page 5, there's a footnote which says MIC Institution of Technology, St. Andrew's Theological College, and Tobago Hospitality and Tourism Institute are currently awaiting board decisions. So if we go back and to tighten with the Ministry of Education document, should they be on the GATE listing, Mr. Pierce?
I would like to respond to that to indicate that those specific institutions you have called have undergone an evaluation process. They have been and are accredited or were accredited up until the point where the evaluation was complete. There was a deadline for submission of their evaluation reports. We have received it. We processed it. They are just awaiting board approval. So any programs that would have been approved within the context of their recent accreditation status would automatically mean that the students would have received GATE. We just have a period of about three months over which these institutions have been awaiting approval, and the board will approve it soon once the matter is addressed at the level of the board.
Right. And additionally to that, are all programs of GATE receipts institutions will receive GATE for all the particular programs? For example, the University of the West Indies, are all the programs accredited in order to receive GATE funding?
She will have to answer to that question, because all we do is evaluate and we provide a list, and thereafter it's taken to the ministry for further discussion and approval.
Mr. Pierce, you could.
So would someone from the ministry respond?
All the programs at the University of the West Indies are GATE funded?
No, not all. Because since the introduction of the standing committee, with respect to recent, the university is a very dynamic place, and they usually have programs that are coming on stream all the time, right? And they develop programs based on needs analysis and what they identify to be of value. Those programs will need to come before a standing committee. First of all, it has to go through the ACTT process of approval. They will go through that rigorous process of determining its, the process for approval. Once approval is given for the program, they will then write, ACTT will write the ministry and says, we have done our evaluation on this particular program, and the university will then apply to the ministry for funding for the program. At that point in time, the ministry will do their evaluation as well, based on our directive, to determine, through the standing committee, to determine the relevance of the program, the impact of the program, and if the program is within the developmental needs of the country, to determine, and of course, the costing, to approve the program for gate funding. And that's the process we will go through thereafter. But
And again, all that information is drilled down to the individual who operates at the customer service desk at the university, I presume. That information is just explaining that the person knowing from day one that, listen, this program is not accredited to receive gate. We hope that the CSR at the particular desk at the University of the West Indies would have that information.
It is a conversation that usually comes in very early in funding, you know?
Yeah, because you see, there's a timeline, you know, Mr.
Huggins.
There's a timeline between you making the application being processed, and then only to know after, when you're anticipating that you're going to get entry to your program.
If you're getting funded.
You get declined, yeah. You know, and it's a real life situation, especially now in 2019.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, to Dr. Ali, so you have accredited institutions and you have accredited programs, no?
We have accredited institutions only, and we have approved programs.
Approved programs.
Most of the accredited programs that are offered in Trinidad and Tobago are with international and regional accrediting bodies in specialized areas, like, for example, medicine and law, etc. But we do not accredit programs currently.
Currently, okay.
You see, I'm wondering if this will puzzle persons where you go to an institution and it is accredited by you, and then they join it, and then some programs are not accredited. So, yeah, not approved. You see, so it comes like, you know, it may, a young person seeking some sort of educational pursuit may go into an institution, hey, it's accredited, but the program at the end of the day may approve it. But one thing, Ms. Ali, I'd want to come about, or even the personnel from the Ministry of Education. I was looking at the submissions that from the joint, you know, on the ACTT submissions, where it's page 14, was, you know, you list the institutions that have applied for accreditation but are still being assessed to evaluated. And I was a bit alarmed to see the Council for Legal Education, the Hugh Wooden Law School. So is it that attorneys are being, you know, after they get their LLB, which may be ACTT approved, but that segment of their continual training, it's not approved. So are we putting out attorneys out there who may not have ACTT approval?
Honorable Member, Chairman, I would just say that every institution has the authority and the right to be able to pursue accreditation voluntarily. Some institutions have chosen, for various reasons, governance and funding and other reasons, not to go in that direction. Obviously, it would mean that, as I said, there are certain benefits provided to institutions that have gone through the institutional accreditation process. But where an institution is registered, they don't normally enjoy those benefits. In terms of attorneys having graduated from the Council of Legal Education, the Council, by way of its treaty, also has provisions made for recognition of those attorneys within the jurisdiction of the Caribbean region. So that treaty makes provision for that, and I think that is what they've looked at over the years in terms of their opportunity to get due recognition for their attorneys.
I've noticed you had mentioned that your standard of payments that you get, it's less than the other institutions abroad in terms of the monies that you could collect, right? Or you have been collecting, right? But looking at your past, a report from Mr. Bradshaw, Michael Bradshaw, he actually noted that, you know, when he had a deficiency of funds coming in, your institution actually had, updates. They had actually ways of raising funds within the institution to help offset certain costs. Do you still follow that procedure?
I could only speak for the 4 months in which I have been positioned in the agency to say that there are plans for revenue-generating activities. Our corporate communications unit has now been focused on stakeholder engagement and fundraising activities, so I've been shifting their priorities to address the deficits that we have in our budget. Notwithstanding, we have in our recurrent, because of the decline we've experienced, we also have some cost-cutting measures that we've entertained in the last few months to address that deficit. But what I can say is, as I indicated, there are plans in place for looking at that. There are new products and services we've already started to develop. We are re-engineering some of our products and services, primarily the standards for some of the areas that we specified. And we are hoping that when that is done, that activity has been completed within the next year or two, that we will have more services that will be offered to institutions and the public to meet the growing demands of a growing a workforce and a growing society. So generally speaking, the answer is yes, we do have plans. In terms of what transpired in the past, I think the submission you would have received from the past executive director would have to speak to that, because he would have been there to look at those issues at that time.
In terms of student complaints, you keep a track of the number of student complaints you all would have received, whether yearly, quarterly? How you all track those stuff?
All of the complaints that come to us eventually are processed by the legal department. So I would ask the legal research officer, the attorney at law, to speak to that matter, please.
And if you can just give us a little breakdown, like for instance, the last 5 years, what sort of complaints you have been receiving?
Sure.
Briefly, and the totals, like yearly as the case may be.
Sure. For the past 3 years, we are in receipt of some 30 complaints, and the last year, 13.
13. And the breakdown, what's the major complaint as such?
It varies. It can be internal. It can be issues ranging from institution offering programs not approved by the ACTT. It can also concern issues of discrimination, issues of unfair treatment, issues related to transcript, issues of certain lecturers not having the requisite qualifications to teach.
And in terms of the investigative response from the ACTT, how you all go about the whole process?
Thank you for that. The process is a very detailed and thorough one. Upon receipt of a complaint from a complainant, the process entails, firstly, the complaint being reviewed by the legal department. That complaint is reviewed to identify the issues. It's also reviewed to determine, very importantly, whether the ACTT has the jurisdiction to determine the complaint. The ACTT, being a creature of statute, cannot process a complaint that doesn't fall under its purview. Following review of that complaint, it should also be noted as well that the review that normally takes place is done in keeping with a number of instruments that are in place to really monitor and regulate institutions. Those instruments include, firstly, the provisions of our Governing Act. It also includes our approved policies, the standards and criteria by which institutions are required to operate, and very importantly, the general conditions. All institutions under the purview of the ACTT, whether you are registered, accredited, or recognized, are required to enter into general conditions. Those conditions specify the terms by which institutions are expected to operate. Following review of the complaint, advice is then provided in determining whether or not the ACTT can, in fact, pursue further. Yes, we do.
Again, according to Section 16 of the Act, the Council is able to receive special grants, whether national, regional, or internationally, for financing of special projects and activities. I know you're only there 4 months, but with regards to your team, have we ever tapped into any of these grants, whether locally, internationally, regionally?
What I would like to do is defer the question to the Director of Finance and Administration. As I indicated, we applied for a grant recently, and we are awaiting approval of that grant. That is specifically to look at the implementation of what is called the National Qualifications Framework in Trinidad and Tobago, and of course the review of our standards. But I would ask the Director of Finance and Administration to speak to that issue.
Thank you, Member. The ACTT have accessed EDF funding in the past. We have applied recently for a grant to do a work study. It's called an employability study to see what areas the education system should be geared at in order to have persons qualified for the areas that we need personnel in. So, for instance, if our development needs a certain type of skill, this work study is to guide students to that area of study in the universities. And we have applied to the EDF, and we have gotten some 500,000 to do that study.
That's TT, US?
No, TT.
We are now faced with an influx of persons coming in from South America. Some persons come in with certain degrees and whatnot. And, you know, do you have any ways of linking up with any institutions in Venezuela or wherever to see if, you know, somehow you could look at their level of education there? How does it link with ACTT? Do you have any links with that?
Generally, Honorable Chairman, the response is yes. What I would say is that we have just launched our new website, which is in 5 languages, including Spanish. The objective is to have persons within the CARICOM community and those persons who are in Latin America be able to navigate our website and to access information. We've also have partners with various embassies where we have that close collaboration to be able to track what is happening in terms of migration and the extent to which that has an impact. What I would like to do is ask the Director, Acting Director of Qualifications and Recognition to speak to some of those specific arrangements.
Thank you, Member. As part of the Qualifications and Recognition Department, we have seen an influx in applications for statements on recognition because of the influx of Venezuelan migrants coming to our shores. And what we do at the department is we conduct the necessary research into the institution, also to verify whether the program was approved or recognized by the Ministry of Education in Venezuela. And based on whether or not the program is recognized or the institution is recognized, we issue a statement on recognition. Also, too, what we have seen as well is that a lot of information on the institutions are currently not available because some websites are down. So what we have done in the past through our embassy in Venezuela, we have contacted Ministry of Foreign Affairs officials there, and they have assisted us in the past. And as Dr. Ali mentioned previously, we have links with the UK NARIC, which is an international database. So we have access to professionals in that agency who assist us as well, so that we are able to issue the statements on recognition, as well as even equivalence assessments, which is another service that we offer.
Well, I thank you for that, because I was concerned about the migrant population would have been disadvantaged. I'd like to pose a question here now. To the Accreditation Council, your submission indicated that preliminary research and analysis was conducted on the shortcomings of the current legislation. However, this has not been referred to or endorsed by any corporate governance body, namely the Board of Directors, nor the line ministry. And I'm referring to, I think, page 73 of your submission. So I want to ask a question. What is the proposed time frame for submitting the proposed changes to the ACTT Act to the Board of Directors and the Ministry of Education?
If I may, Honorable Chairman, to indicate that we have an agenda set for the new Board of Directors for the at least next 4 or 5 months, and it includes some of those issues that you mentioned in terms of areas of legislation that requires their review. You would have to understand that there are more pressing issues, namely institutions that have no status that would need to be approved quickly by the Board of Directors. Once that has been done, this matter will be raised with the board, and thereafter it will be channeled to the ministry from the board, the chairman of the board, to ensure that the ministry can act upon the advice that we've rendered.
Litigations. You all have ever been subject to any litigation, ACTT?
My response to that is no, but I'll allow the attorney at law to elaborate.
Member, since ACTT's inception to the current period, there has been no litigation proceedings initiated against the ACTT as it relates to any of our decisions as it relates to registration, accreditation, recognition, program approval. There has been no litigation proceedings initiated against the ACTT to date.
So as a result of that, well, we can say there's no need for an appeals process as a result of, because I know the Ministry of Education had mentioned in their submission, you know, that there is the provision for an appeals committee with regards to the ACCT structure and so on.
An appeals committee is very important. Despite no litigation proceedings being initiated against ACTT, we are still confronted from time to time to deal with complaints. Institutions may challenge certain decisions. And so moving forward, it is very important that such a committee is appointed. The current circumstances are, in the absence of such a committee, those aggrieved institutions, stakeholders, students would have no choice but to petition the courts.
Mr. Pierce, you want to shed any light there?
Yeah, you better take this one.
Thank you, Honorable Member. We recognize the need for the appeal committee, and we have, in discussion with the ACTT, we had a meeting in September, and we noted to them the need to have it established because they had requested the ministry to establish the appeals committee. We did ask them for a legal brief that will guide us, which was submitted about a week or two ago. We sent it to our legal counsel. She's examining it, and we will continue the discussions to so establish because it is in the Act.
Well, we've heard the constraints that I think you are faced with, Dr. Ali, the financial staffing, I heard, and we also realize you have a lot of work set out for your new board of directors. And just in closing, there's one question to the Ministry of Education. You had, in your submission, you stated that the ACTT fosters improved or higher standards among providers. That was page 4, paragraph C of your submissions, right? So since they fall under your purview, and it seems that you have been pleased with them, and what we're hearing so far, we realize the constraints. I want to ask, what benchmarks has the Ministry of Education utilized to justify its analysis of the ACTT? Have you conducted any research on the best practices of accrediting institutions?
The short answer to that would be no, but we have looked at ACC's performance in terms of the time frame for delivery. And we have noted the fact that they don't have any complaints. Nothing has really come to us. We have seen an improvement. We know there have been constraints, but even in spite of the constraints, ACCT has complied with most of our deliverables. So generally, we have 11 agencies that we provide oversight for. ACCT performs. So we are not displeased.
Well, since 2007, it was a lot of work to be done, and I think you're on the right path. And at this stage, I think we have done a lot this morning. I don't know if any other members would like to make any other questions, Mr. Badukesho.
You know, the Secretariat just identified to me as a follow-up here. Regarding a complaint against the ACTT related to its advice provided to an institution on the requirement of statutory approvals for registration of institutions, can the ministry now clarify for us, right? It's stated on page 4 of your provisions, whether all tertiary institutions must have statutory approvals in order to operate in Trinidad and Tobago. That's one. And secondly, whether statutory approvals are a prerequisite for registration with the ACTT. Right, and again, the Ministry of Education would have submitted in their proposal on page 4, question Roman numeral 6.
With respect to the statutory approvals, I am also responsible for the infrastructure portfolio of the ministry. And that's all the schools, all the ECC centers. We require statutory approvals for these centers because it is a health and safety issue. You cannot have students, teachers, members of the public go into an institution that does not have basic statutory approvals. And in fact, it should not even be a prerequisite. It should be, this is the thing that you require before even the ACT comes to have a conversation with you. This is not a negotiating factor. If you can't get fire, you can't get town and country planning approval, you can't get the regional corporations to sign off on an institution, then you have no right having an institution operating. And you cannot be wasting ACTT's time if you don't put those basic things in place. That's from me.
Any comment?
From the ACTT side, our standards provide examples of evidence to meet the requirements for operating a learning establishment. And those standards have traditionally required statutory approvals. We also require institutions to demonstrate that they have various health and safety provisions made. So that, for example, where occupational health and safety is concerned and where evacuations are mandatory, that the necessary checklists, we have a checklist of criteria, and we evaluate those when we have a site visit. So when our evaluators go in, they check to see whether those are in place. So generally speaking, our response to that is, it is helpful if institutions have statutory approvals, because it would, of course, give the ACTT an opportunity to ensure that they've been meeting those requirements. But we do have alternatives where institutions can, in fact, provide us with a wide range of evidence requirements to meet the standards.
And Mr. Chairman, my final question again. The ACTT provided us with a list of institutions that are not registered. They would have also provided us with a list of institutions that are accredited, right? So in writing, I would like you all to provide through you, Mr. Chair, the list of registered institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. I know you mentioned that it's on the website, but just to ensure that this particular institution in the East, right, you know what I mean, I would like to get it officially, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any other question from members? Okay. So I got it was a full morning. I find, you know, a lot of knowledge, but Member Ford has not been forthcoming in this institution in the East, so at least you have some investigation to do. So, okay, so you would have the complaint, yes. So you see? Okay. So at this stage, I would like to invite Dr. Ali to give any sort of brief closing remarks, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee. On behalf of the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago, and I can safely say the board, because we have a board now, the management and staff of ACTT, we are indeed grateful for this opportunity, where we have had the opportunity to provide some level of accountability to the public, and more specifically to the Parliament. We believe that this dialogue has really been insightful, has allowed us to do some introspection, and provides us for the opportunity to craft a strategic plan that we believe will be helpful to the public of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Kurt Meyer, Permanent Secretary, give us some brief closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have listened very intently to the questions, and we have noted what could be considered some gaps in how we operate. And we will continue to work closely with ACTT to close these gaps to ensure that the quality of education offered to the students and the people of Trinidad and Tobago is of an ever-increasing standard. Thank you.
Thank you. So you have heard the concerns, and you have given us reassurance that things will improve soon, and we are grateful for that. And I'd like to thank you for your attendance and your participation. I'd like to thank the members of the media who is here, and also thank members of my committee and staff for their participation and support. And if there are no further business, I would like for consideration, I would like to declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.